Hey guys, so if you're here, I'm going to read Twilight again. Like I said before, no copyright infringement intended, free use act, and I'm going to pick up where I left off. Okay, let's get started. Gotta find it. Hold on. Okay. Now, I don't know where I left off, but this is what I'm going to start. I'm going to start on page 22. I felt the surge of pity and relief. Pity because, as beautiful as they were outsiders, clearly not accepted. Relief that I was not the only newcomer here, and certainly not the most interesting by any standard. As I examined them, the youngest one of the Cullens looked up to meet my gaze, this time with a swift evidence of curiosity in his expression. I looked swiftly away. It seemed to me that his glance held some kind of unmerrimed expression. Which one is the boy with the reddish hair? I asked, peeking at him from the corner of my eye. And he was still staring at me, but not gawking like the other students had today. He had slightly frustration expression, and I looked down again. That's Edward. He's gorgeous, of course, but don't waste your time. He doesn't date. Apparently none of the girls here are good-looking enough for him. I stiffened in a clear case of sour grapes. I wondered when he turned her down. I bit my lip to hide my smile. Then I glanced at him again. He turned his face away. I thought his cheeks, apparently, lifted as if they were smiling too. After a few more minutes, the four of them left the table together. They were noticeable, graceful, even the big brawny one. It was unsettling to watch. The one named Edward didn't look at me again. I sat at the table, Jessica and her friends, longer than I would have if I'd been sitting alone. I was anxious to not be late for my first class on my first day. Once, one of my new acquaintances, who considered to remind me that her name was Angela, had biology too, with me in the next hour. We walked to class together in silence. She was shy too. When we entered the classroom, Angela went to sit at the black-top table exactly like the one I was used to. She already had a neighbor. In fact, all the tables were filled but one. Next to the center aisle, I recognized Edward Cullen by his unusual hair, sitting at the next to the single open seat. As I walked down the aisle to introduce myself, the teacher, to get my slip signed, I watched him suspiciously as I just passed. He suddenly rigid in his seat. He stared at me, meeting my eyes with the strangest expression on his face. It was hostile, furious. I looked away quickly, shocked, going red again. I stumbled over a book, walking through to catch myself at the edge of the table. Girls sitting there giggled. I noticed that his eyes were black, coal black. Mr. Banner signed my slip, handed me a book. No nonsense introductions. I could tell we were going to get along, of course. He had no choice but to send me to the open table in the middle of the room. I kept my eyes down and went to sit by him, bewildered by his antonic stare he'd give me. I didn't look up from the book on the table. I took my seat. I saw his composure change from the corner of my eye. He leaned away from me, sitting extremely on the edge of his chair, averting his face, like he smelled something bad. Inconspicuously, I sniffed my hair. It smelled like strawberries, the scent of my favorite shampoo. An innocent enough odor. I let my hair fall over my right shoulder, making a dark curtain between us, trying to pay attention to the teacher. Unfortunately, the lecture was on circle cell anatomy, something I've already studied. I took notes carefully. Anyway, always looking down. I couldn't help myself from peeking from occasionally through the screen of my hair at the strange boy next to me. During the whole class, he never relaxed, in a stiff position on the edge of the chair, sitting far away from me as possibly as I could see. His hand was on his left leg, clenched into a fist, tentations standing under his pale skin. This, too, never relaxed. He had a long sleeve of pale white shirt pushed up to the elbow. His forearms were surprisingly hard, muscular, beneath their layer of light skin. He was nearly slight as he looked next to his burly brother. Class seemed to drag on no longer than the others. It was because the day was finally coming to a close, or because I waited for his tight fist to be loosened. It never did. He continued to sit still. It looked like he wasn't breathing. What's wrong with him? Was this his normal behavior? I questioned my judgment on Jessica's bitterness at lunch today. Maybe she was not resentful as I thought. It could it couldn't have been anything to do with me. He didn't even know me from Eve. I peeked up one more time and regretted it. His glaring down at me, his black eyes filled with revulsion. I flinched away from him, shrieking against my chair. The phrase, "If looks could kill," suddenly ran through my mind. At the moment the bell rang the loudest, made me jump, and Edward Cullen was out of his seat, fluid as he rose. He was much taller than I thought. His back was to me. He was out the door before anyone else was out of their seat. Excuse me. I sat there frozen in my seat, staring blankly after him. He was so mean, it wasn't fair. I began to gather my things slowly, trying to block the anger that filled me. Fear in my eyes would tear up. For some reason, my temper was hardwired to my tear ducts. I usually cried when I was angry. Humiliating tendency. "Aren't you Isabella Swan?" a male voice asked. I looked up at the cute baby boy face, pale blonde hair, carefully in ordered spikes, smiling at me in a friendly way. He obviously didn't think I smelled bad. "Bella," I corrected him. "I'm Mike." "Hi, Mike. Do you need any help finding your next class?" "I'm headed to the gym, actually. I think I can find it. That's my next class, too." He seemed thrilled, though. It wasn't a big coincidence at this small school. We walked together. He was a chatter. He supplied the most conversational, which was made easier for me. He lived in California till he was 10, so he knew how I felt about the sun. It turned out he was my English class. He was in my English class also. The nicest person I met today. But as we entered the gym, "Yeah, so did you stab Edward Cullen with a pencil or what? I've never seen him react like that." I cringed. So I wasn't the only one that noticed. And apparently Edward Cullen's unusual behavior. I decided to play dumb. "Was that the boy I sat to in biology?" I asked. "Yes. He looked like he was in pain or something. I don't know. I never spoke to him. He's a weird guy," Mike said. Ingerson lingered on me until he headed to the dressing room. "I was lucky. If I were lucky to sit by you, I would have talked to you." I smiled at him before walking into the girls' locker room door. He was friendly enough, clearly admiring, but he wasn't enough to ease my irritation. The gym teacher, Coach Clapp, found me in a uniform, but didn't make me dress down the day for PE class at home. Only 2 years of PE were required. Here, PE was mandatory all 4 years. Forks was literally my personal hell on earth. I watched 4 volleyball games, running strenuously, remembering how many injuries I sustained and inflicted playing volleyball. I felt faintly nauseated as the final bell rang at last. I walked slowly towards the office, returning my paperwork. The rain had drifted, the wind stronger, colder. I wrapped my arms around myself. I walked into the warm office and almost turned around and walked back out. Edward Cullen stood at the desk in front of me. I recognized his trounced bronze hair. He didn't appear to notice the sound of my entrance. I pressed against the back wall, waiting for the receptionist to be free. He was arguing with her in a low, attractive voice. I quickly picked up the gist of the argument. He was trying to trade his 6-hour biology class to any other time. I couldn't believe this was about me. It had to be with something else in the class before I entered the biology room. The look on his face must have been another aggravating eternity. It was impossible that the stranger that suddenly took an instant dislike to me The door opened again, and the cold wind suddenly blew a gush through the room, rustling papers off the desk. My hair twirled around my face, and the girl that came in stepped to the desk, placed a note in a wire basket, walked back out. But Edward's back stiffened. He turned slowly and glared at me, his face absurdly handsome. With his piercing, hate-filled eyes, for an instant I felt a thrill of general fear, raising the hairs on my arms. The look lasted a second, but it chilled me more than the freezing wind. He turned to the receptions. "Never mind, then," he said in a hasty voice like velvet. "I can see that it's impossible. Thank you so much for your help." He turned on his heels, and without looking at me, he disappeared out the door. I went meekly to the front desk, my face white for once instead of red, handed my slip in. "How'd your first day go, dear?" the receptionist maternally. "Fine," I lied in a voice weak. She didn't look convinced. When I got into my truck, it was almost the last car on the lot. It seemed like heaven already, the closest thing to home I had in this damp green hole. I sat inside for a while, staring at the windshield blankly, but as soon as it was cold enough, I needed a heater. Turned the key, the engine came to life. I headed to Charlie's house, fighting back tears the whole way. And the next will be Book 2, Chapter 2, Open Book. Talk to y'all later. Super Move, you're out.